alliances are risky. When you're in a team game in Age of Empires 2 DE, you are reliant to some extent on the performance of your allies, how they're going to play, what decisions they're going to make. There's a lot that you can't control, but one of the things that it is nice to rely upon is the fact that you know that no matter which civilization your ally is, they are bringing something extra to the table in the form of a team bonus, right? Team bonuses can be very powerful for giving your own civilization advantages and also for you to give advantages to the civilizations of your allies. So in this video, we're going to take a look at the team bonuses. We're going to rank them and think how well they synergize with the team game meta and how well they're going to help you bring home victory, take home the gold, and get some wins out there and boost that elo up there on the ladder. So with that being said, let's go ahead, jump into this video and get after it. What is going on, everybody? It's your boy Jimmy James 59, and I have a really cool tier list that I am very excited to share with you. Today I'm going to be ranking the best team bonuses in Age of Empires 2 DE, and I just want to go ahead and get the criteria for our ranking system settled from the jump, and we're just going to jump into the video here. The first thing I want to do is talk about things that I'm not going to consider in the game. So technologies like human mercenaries or the Vietnamese paper money technology, which are technologies from the castle that affect your teammates, are not going to be considered in this video. There are other team game videos that I have planned where I will consider that, but here we're talking about team bonuses because the team bonus is actually a pretty specific bonus in that it is a civilization bonus that each civ has that is unique to them, but it also is shared with your allies. So it's actually a really strong bonus, and so we're going to consider that separately here. Now, what we are going to consider are a few characteristics. One, how does this bonus primarily affect team games? How is it affecting the play of your allies, right? We're going to consider this more as really almost like an 80-20, 90-10 split, thinking about how the bonus is going to help your allies and help the team as a whole. And of course, you know, you're a part of that team, but there's no I in team, but of course there's definitely a U. I'll let you spell that one out and see how that works. Anyways, right? So the next thing we're going to think about is how does it help different types of team games from a player positional structure? This is what I mean to that, right? Team games are typically played 2 versus 2, 3 versus 3, or 4 versus 4. Now, 2v2 team games, typically the way it's played, and I'm talking specifically about more open land maps here. That's what we're going to be focusing on in this video because that tends to be the most common map type you're going to run into. These 2v2 games, the meta is usually for one player to play cavalry and the other player to play archers, right? So that's the kind of strategy set that we're going to be considering. Now, in a 3 versus 3, the positioning of the teams gets a bit more interesting. And so I'm going to put a little graphic on here to show you what I mean by this. But the way that the 3v3 matchup is set is that you got to remember the AOE2 map is basically a diamond. And so in a 3v3, right, we have players positioned right in this arc, and at the edges of that arc are what we call the flanks, and flanks usually play archer civilizations. Now, that middle civilization right there, we call that the pocket, and the pocket is going to typically play cavalry. The reason you typically want your pocket playing cavalry is because they're in a position actually to help both flanks, and the flanks are so far apart that they're not really in a position to help one another. Now, the pocket also, right, because they want to help their allies, they want a fast unit that can get to and from each place, and team game maps are typically bigger, so it takes a little bit longer to get from point A to point B, so playing cavalry is very useful there. And also, you know, another aspect of this as well is that usually the pocket civilizations are the furthest apart from your enemies as well, and so playing that cavalry civilization that typically needs a bit more economy to keep its units up and running, right? Typically scouts and knights here, right? You have a bit easier of a time actually going for that when you're playing in the pocket. Now, that's 3v3. 4v4 is actually very similar to 3v3. It's just that instead of having one pocket, we have two pockets, right? So there's really a pocket attached to each flank, and in this case, it's similar to 3v3. The flanks are going to play archers, the pockets are going to play cavalry, right? So that is the sort of player positional setup that we're going to be going in, presuming, throughout most of this video. Now, we're also going to consider what stage of the game is the bonus hitting at, right? A bonus that is having effect throughout the game is a much stronger bonus at least in the moments that it's able to affect your opponent than, say, a bonus that is having only a small effect on the game. Now, I should say that just because a bonus is only affecting, say, a small phase of the game, and by a small phase I mean maybe like a short window of time, right? So say maybe just Dark Age or just Feudal Age, that doesn't mean it's necessarily a bad bonus. And in fact, if the bonus is very powerful and is the kind of bonus that can help you put civilizations away in a particular age, so to give you a really big advantage in Feudal Age or give you a really big advantage in the late game, we're actually going to rank those bonuses quite highly, because team games are all about coordination, taking advantage of your opportunities, and playing together. And so those kind of team game bonuses, right, that give you big advantages and sort of power spikes, you might say, at different points, those are going to be really strong. So we're gonna really consider those in this tier list video. And the last thing I was going to say is that I'm going to split the difference kind of on land and water bonuses here. I'm going to try to judge the water bonuses a bit more independently from the land bonuses, but I am going to probably downgrade them a little bit, just because it is worth keeping in mind, right, that if you have a civilization that just has a water bonus, essentially what they are doing is not contributing anything to the team on land maps. And so we have to keep that in mind, but I'm also not going to judge that completely. We'll treat water bonuses with a bit more of a special touch. All right, so let's jump into the video. We have our tier list all set up. I've got my notes, just going to check to make sure we're looking good, and we are. And okay, let's get this thing kicked off, and I want to start with the Aztecs, and Aztecs are going to go right into the A tier, right? So the Aztecs bonus is that their relics, and so the relics of your allies, will generate 33% more gold, right? So relics generate 30 gold per minute, right? And if you want to learn more about that, go ahead, check out my monastery tier list video, right? It's got a lot of good information in there for you. And if you enjoy that video, or if you enjoyed this video, go ahead, like either video, like both video. It helps us out with the algorithm, right? Now, Aztecs, right, generating a lot more gold here, going from 30, right, plus 33%, it's going to be 40 gold per relic. That is pretty strong, right? That basically means that when you have 3 relics, it's like another civilization having 4. Now, that really adds up. However, the reason that this is not an S tier bonus is that gold in team games, because players can build markets and then send trade carts between them, then that means that gold, which is generated by those trade carts, is technically infinite. And so at some point, the bonus is not adding as much. Now, I think where this bonus is really, really helping is when you are trying to get to Imperial Age, but again, we're talking about team game meta, right? We have cavalry units and archer units being created. We have a lot of gold units being created, and so you can get worried about production trying to get up to the next age. With the Aztec relic bonus, right, that's going to help you out a little bit. Now, the other thing about this bonus, and there's a reason why it's not an S tier bonus, is that while this is a nice, like extra gold income to have, the unfortunate thing about it is that because of the fighting in Castle Age and the power spikes and the opportunism that players are usually playing with, and all the focus on coordination, relics often suffer as a priority, And not only that, but the earliest that this bonus is probably going to come into play is sometime during early to mid Castle Age, and it's going to take time to actually collect all of those relics. And so it's a bonus that the window is just kind of small that it's actually having an effect on your civilization. And again, because right by the time the markets get set up, which is generally sometime around early Imperial Age that you're probably going to be doing that, it is kind of a small window for the Aztec bonus to be really helping out your civilization. So again, I think it's a good bonus, but it's just one of those bonuses that is not it's just impacting the game in a shorter phase than some of the other bonuses in the game. Now, speaking of bonuses that are not having much impact on team games, we got to go with the Berbers, and I'm going to give them a big ol' F here. The Berber team bonus is that they have Genitors available. Genitors are a mounted skirmisher. This is just not very useful in basically all situations. And the reason, you got to think about it this way, right? If you're a Berber ally and you're making Genitors, then you're just going to get killed by knights. And so that's not very strong. And you're just not adding that much to your army. And Genitors are actually kind of expensive. So even though they're technically considered a trash unit, it's just not the kind of unit that you are going to see all that often, or it's going to add a lot to your army composition. So I think this is F tier. It's extremely rare that you see Genitors in team games. Maybe if somebody is trying to go for a meme strategy, or something else unusual is going on, or maybe it's just trying to mix them in. I just think their impact is very, very marginal. So we got to put them at the F tier. All right, next up we have the Bohemians. The Bohemians are going to go straight into the S tier, right? The Bohemian team bonus is that markets work 80% faster, and this is fantastic. One of the things about getting trade up in Imperial Age is that it takes a lot of time to get your trade set up so that your trade carts are generating enough gold revenue that you can continuously stream, say, Paladins or Arbalest. Trade carts take 51 seconds to train. So if your markets are working 80% faster, you are dramatically decreasing the training time of those trade carts, enabling you to get them out on the field earlier, start collecting that gold. This can be very, very powerful and allow you to get your late game streaming unit composition set up much faster than your opponents. And not only that, but in post-imperial settings, often what dictates the end of a game is which civilization which team can keep their trade up and running. Well, if your trade lines get raided, having faster working markets to get those trade carts back out on the field, much easier done with Bohemians. So again, this is a late game bonus, right? But it can be so powerful that to me, this is easily in the S tier. All right, next up we have the Britons, and the Britons, I gotta put them in the S tier. Archery ranges work 20% faster with the Britons. Now, in a 2v2 setting, this is still having a pretty big effect on the battlefield, because as the archer player, you're going to have much more archers than your opponent, and that can be really dominant. Britons are just such a dominant archer civilization in team games. It's unbelievable. And then in a 3v3 or a 4v4, right? In a 3v3, you're going to have another archer player, so now it's going to help your teammate there, and the same thing goes for a 4v4. So this bonus is actually having a lot of effect on the game, and so for that reason, it's an easy S tier. All right, next up, we're going to take a look at the Bulgarians, and the Bulgarians bonus, I gotta put it in the C tier. Your blacksmiths work faster. I believe it's 80% faster, and so that means when you're researching technologies like fletching or bodkin arrow, +2 armor for knights, then you're going to get those technologies available to your units much more quickly. Now, this is actually a pretty nice bonus here because it allows you to play more opportunistically. So say you hit Castle Age, right? And oftentimes in team games, you have both armies kind of working together, and knights are kind of dancing around in the field, soaking up arrow fire. and trying to keep the crossbowmen safe so they can keep a strong mass. And so being able to get that +2 armor more easily enables you to actually go ahead and dive and take more fights, maybe even take more fights into opponents' town centers, right? The reason this is only a C tier bonus is because saving that little bit of time, right, it just has very, very small windows where it's effective, and so we have to keep that in mind. All right, next up we have the Burgundians, and the Burgundians is going to go into the B tier. So we have a really similar bonus here to the Aztecs, except the thing about Burgundians is Burgundian relics generate both food and gold, right? And so that's actually pretty cool. They generate 30 food per minute, so the same amount, right? As the same amount of food as is being created by the gold from your relics. And this can be a really nice bonus, but it's only a B tier because, again, at this stage of the game, you're probably going to have quite a number of farms up for your archer players, right? It's much more helpful because they're only spending wood and gold on military units. It's really not as helpful for them as, say, the Aztec bonus, which, if your archer players are collecting relics, they're going to get more gold. Again, it can be useful for helping you collect that food to get up to the next age. But again, you also have to think, once again, like the Aztecs, it's affecting a very, very small window of play. And food, oftentimes you have an abundance of it anyways. So it's just not coming through clutch. But it is nice to have that food. And getting, say, for your archer teammates, that power spike earlier to get an Arbalist, that can give you some opportunities to win games. Or even helping your cavalry player, right, have that food so that they can get up a little bit faster, research very expensive technologies. It can help, it's just not an overpowering bonus. Next up, we have the Burmese, and Burmese, unfortunately, I think I gotta put them in the D tier. Their team bonus is that relic positions on the map are going to be available to all of your allies. Again, relics don't play a major role in team games, and the thing that really downgrades this bonus for the Burmese is that once you get a market up, you and your allies are going to have free cartography anyways. So if you didn't have this bonus, then once you got your market up, you would see everything that your ally has explored, and it's very likely that just through that, you'll reveal a lot of the relic positions on the maps. And again, relics just aren't as important in team games as they are in 1v1s. So I think that this really has to be a D tier because at the end of the day, it's not getting you anything. And so if you can't go ahead and grab those relics, then it's not really doing you much of any good in the first place. All right, next up we have the Byzantines. And the Byzantines, I think, I'm going to put them in the C tier here. The Byzantines bonus is that monks heal basically at double the speed. This is good, but monks are not, again, they're not that prevalent on Arabia. They're a bit more prevalent on Arena, but on Arena, healing is probably more of a tertiary responsibility. Collecting relics, converting units, I think is much more important. And so for that reason, right, improving a tertiary ability is going to reflect in a tertiary team bonus ranking. So that's where we're going to have to stick them. Right in the C tier. Not a bad bonus, but probably not going to change the game either. All right, now we're going to look at the Celts. And Celts are pretty interesting. I have Celts slotted in the B tier. The team bonus for the Celts is that siege workshops work 20% faster. Now, obviously, this is affecting probably later stages of the game. You tend to not see a lot of siege in team games until you get to the later phases of the game. But this really comes into play when, say, your opponent is making something like bombard cannons. And bombard cannons and trebuchets, I think, are two of the more common siege units that you see because they have so much range. Making mangonels and onagers, their range is too short oftentimes, and so it's a lot easier for cavalry units to snipe them. Siege rams you do see actually a decent bit, and so this bonus is going to help you if you're going for siege rams too. I mean, siege is an important part of the late game, and so having a bonus that affects that is pretty strong. It's only affecting like one very specific dimension of the game. It's a nice bonus, but I think it's really only worthy of a B tier. Okay, next up we have the Chinese, and Chinese, right? I think they also slide into B tier here. Basically, you and your allies get 10% more food on farms. That is nice to have a little bit more longevity out of your food and delay some farm reseeding in the mid game. And in the late game, maybe it's nice to have some wood saved over time, because if you get into a really late game, then you want to have some of that extra wood to keep your civilization going. I still just think that 10% food, it's just not that much, and food is not a terribly scarce resource by that mid Castle Age sort of, well, early to early mid Castle Age moment when this bonus is going to help some. And so I just think it's a decent bonus, but it's really not getting us any higher than the B tier. Now next up we have the Cumans, and with Cumans, I think this flirts between an S or an A tier. I think for right now, I'm going to put them in the A tier. So Cumans are interesting in that they're bonuses that palisade walls for you and your allies have 50% more HP. This is really a strong bonus because in team games, it's very important to wall up, right? Sometimes in 1v1s, you can play a strategy where your best defense is a good offense, right? That can be risky to play in 1v1s because you can be vulnerable to a counterattack. But definitely in a 2 versus 2 game, getting walled up can be really important. I mean, if you're the scout player in a team game and you see 8 archers and 2 spearmen, it can be really hard to defend against that because it's typically uncommon for scout players to make skirmishers. So it can be hard to keep walls up oftentimes in some settings, and it's a massive help to be having that extra HP and allow you to kind of quick wall behind it, market wall, blacksmith wall, etc. Now, for me, the only reason it isn't S tier is because probably a lot of your walls are going to be houses. So because of that fact, right, it's not really changing the game so much here. And at some point in the game, right, walls become just not as important, right, when your economy starts to spread out more across the map. Again, I think it's a very good bonus, and I actually think it's close to being an S tier bonus, honestly. I think it's closer to being an S tier probably than an A tier. But given the prevalence of house walling, and the fact that on team games often you're walling in a much smaller space, I think it's just not quite on that level where it is winning you games, but I do think it can keep you from losing quite a few games. And there is a subtle distinction between those two concepts, and the latter I think makes you an A tier, but the former, right, winning games, definitely puts you into the S tier. All right, so now we're going to move on to the Ethiopians, and this is a tough one. I think it's really in D and an F tier. I think in team games it's really an F tier. Ethiopians, your towers and outposts have more line of sight. This is okay, but towers and outposts are just not that common. They're all right, especially outposts, I think, are maybe a bit more common. You could maybe play a little bit of guard tower defense in your base too. But if you're playing defense in your base, right, you're probably not getting as much out of the line of sight because you're probably already seeing a whole lot. So I just think that this is not having a major effect on the game. And for me, I just really think it's an F tier bonus. It's just not having much of an impact. Vision with Outpost is pretty nice, and that's the really good part. But oftentimes the vision that you're going to have is going to be from your opponent's scouts, running around, finding damage, etc. And you're probably not sending a lot of villages with your troops. Happens sometimes, right? But it's very different than the play in like a 1v1 where you might be following up, your crossbows with a forward siege workshop and like playing very positionally. Team games tend to feature a lot more movement and mobility, right? It's a bit more like basketball or soccer or hockey than it is a game like American football. So I think it's an F tier bonus. I think you could make a case for D based mainly on the outpost having more line of sight in late game, but you're probably seeing so much of the map at that point at any rate. So I think I'm going to stick with it being an F tier bonus. Now next up we have the Franks. I'm going to put the Franks up in the B tier actually. So their bonus is that Knights have +2 line of sight, and I think this could be a decently strong bonus because oftentimes in fights there's so much coordination with two armies tracking one another. And so having that line of sight bonus, I'm a big fan of the line of sight bonuses, and that can be really helpful in order to take more tactical engagements. It's helping not only in Castle Age and beyond, but it's important to realize that it's mainly a tactical bonus, and it's not really sort of a macro strategy kind of bonus. It's just going to help you take better fights, but taking a bad fight in a team game can really set you behind. So I do think that that's a pretty good thing to have the extra line of sight. But remember, it's only helping you from Castle Age onward. So for me, I think that puts it in the B tier. Now next up we have the Goths. I think Goths to me, either a C or a D tier bonus. I'm going to say a C tier. The bonus for Goths is that barracks work 20% faster, right? The problem is that you're just probably not making a lot of infantry units throughout most team games. So I just don't think it's having a major effect. I do think maybe if you're going for some men-at-arms play and like a 2v2, being able to get them on the field a bit quicker so they're across the map a bit more quickly. And that's pretty underrated in a 2v2 because you got to remember the map is a lot bigger. So there is something to be said for it. And I think maybe in late game, if for some reason you have to switch to halberdiers, then that bonus can be extremely strong. But I think the truth is that if you are switching to halberdiers, then it's probably your Goth player that's going to be doing it anyways. But they are getting units out in the field, and maybe your teammate needs to do it. So I could say C tier. The barracks is a common military building, and so having it work faster can be pretty nice, but I think it's extremely limited. All right, next up we have the Huns, and the Huns to me is easy S tier. So the fact with the Huns, the bonus is that your stables work 20% faster, and this is going to massively help you get numbers for your scouts or your knights in Feudal Age, Castle Age, or Imperial Age. And if you're playing in a 4v4, right, this is going to massively help the other pocket civilization. So it's really helping you perform your role as a cavalry player extremely well. It's going to be not really adding any more to a 3v3, but it is going to be helping you get more numbers out to get to more places. So again, it's mostly helping you there. So, and being able to get more cavalry numbers out in the field is really important. And then in a 4v4, right, I think it's one of the best team bonuses in the game. So I think ultimately you add all that together, and that makes it for me an S tier bonus. Okay, moving on to the Incas. The Incas probably have, they definitely have the worst team bonus in the game, where farms are seeded twice as fast. Marginal bump to your food, and that's about it. So not a lot to say. It's not terribly helpful. Okay, next up we have the Indians. And Indians, I'm going to put them in the C tier, right? Their team bonus is the camels are doing more attack against buildings. I think it's +4. And this can be really helpful if your other pocket needs to go camels, right? Because one of the major limitations on camels, and if you want to check out my camel tier list, highly suggest that you do so. Camels are just, at the end of the day, for most civilizations, they're really more of a mobile defensive unit. Now, being able to do damage against buildings is one of the things that can make camels a much better offensive unit, because you can take out production buildings, you can maybe even take out town centers, right? So that's good, but camels in team games are just not all that common, first of all, because they really suffer against crossbows and arbalists because of their low, and by low I mean non-existent base pierce armor. And knights are still a much better rating unit because they have more pierce armor and they have more melee armor as well. So knights are still just better for team games. And so I think that, again, I think it can help you if you're playing as Indians, or if you're playing in a 4v4 and you have maybe like a Berber or a Turk pocket that wants to do it. But honestly, I think this is really just a C tier bonus. Next up, we have the Italians, and I think Italians are going to keep us in the C tier, right? So their team bonus is that your allies have access to the Condottiero. It is a quickly created, quickly moving, rather durable infantry unit that has an attack bonus against gunpowder units, and that also takes less damage from gunpowder units. It's kind of like the gunpowder Huscarl. And the issue with it is that it's just quite situational, right? Condottieri can have some relevance. I mean, where they really come to the fore is on water maps, and Italians are a very common water civ, where there is something that was meta for a while, where with Italians, or if you have an Italian teammate, right, somebody lands the opponent, and they do an amphibious assault, an early Imperial Age, and they put down a bunch of barracks and make a bunch of Condottieri. So, and that can be a really strong move, and you got to remember, this is a team unit. So civilizations that have strong infantry bonuses, like Japanese, like Vikings, like Goths, right, Teutons even, they're going to have very, very powerful Condottieri. Malians with the extra pierce armor, right, can be very strong. So there are some civilizations that can have some very strong Condottieri, and, you know, maybe in a late game, you could possibly think about adding it as a unit that if you're, say, an opponent's going halberdiers, right, somebody can go Condottieri in order to, you know, basically be a trash killer, and because gold is infinite and condos do cost a bit of gold, that can be pretty helpful. And the great thing about condos is that you get them as soon as you hit Imperial Age. You don't have to research anything. You just got to get your blacksmith upgrades, and so they can be a good response if, say, a player is going, say, all halberdiers because they've sort of lost the cavalry battle and they're trying to come back into the game. Being able to just crank out a bunch in a short time window can be really effective. So I think it's a C tier unit, and maybe depending on the situation that it's in, could be even a B tier unit. I think if you're talking strictly water maps, right, probably more of a B tier unit, looking at it there. Japanese. Now, Japanese is where we get into a civilization. One of our first that is a purely water map team bonus. And on the basis of water maps, I'm going to put them in the B tier, keeping in mind, right, that they're not helping you at all in landlocked games. But their team bonus is that galleys have +2 line of sight. And I think that can be really, really helpful on the water, seeing more of the map so you can find opponents' fishing ships, so you can find where opponents are gathering, right, say their fire ships, something like that. And I think, again, I think these line of sight bonuses are often quite strong. Not all of them, but I think are often quite strong. And galley play is an important part of water. So anything that's helping you fight better there, I think is a good bonus. And so I think it's worthy of a B tier, but again, keep in mind, we're not really comparing it to the land bonuses right now. Okay, next up we have the Khmer, and I think I gotta put Khmer into the D tier. The bonus here is that Scorpions have +1 range, but Scorpions are a pretty uncommon unit in team games, I think. You rarely see them. You know, maybe if you're trying to play a little bit of defense at your base, you could do that, but it's just they're so rare to see. I just don't think it's having that much of a help, but it can if you're looking for a cheap way to defend against archers and you don't have that many. You have a siege workshop, crank out a Scorpion. It might be able to keep your opponent at bay if they don't have any cavalry friends in tow, but if they do, then you're really sunk. So I'd say it's D tier. Next up, Koreans. Koreans are somewhere between C and D tier, I think, as well. I think I'm going to put them in the C tier. So, for Koreans, mangonels have less of a minimum range. I think it's only 1 minimum range there. And that's really helpful if you're making mangonels, which is pretty uncommon. Maybe if you're going some kind of pike siege in late game for some reason, again, pretty uncommon. So it's one of those things, if you are doing it, I think it's a nice bonus, but if you're not, it's not really moving the needle, right? So we'll call that a C tier. Next up, we have the Lithuanians. I think Lithuanians are actually more of a B or C tier. I'm going to call them a C tier because their team bonus is that monasteries work 20% faster. Again, monks don't play a major role in team games, except for arena, right? I think this is probably closer to a B or an even A tier bonus in team game arena. And the issue with that, I gotta say though, is that it can be tough because oftentimes there's so many units around, and so when you're contesting for relics, there's typically already a lot of scouts out on the field. And so being able to, say, replenish your dead monks can be helpful, but I don't know. I think it's just kind of tricky to see how it affects the game. I think it's much more important for the Lithuanians themselves to collect relics and try to get extra damage on their Nightline or their lightest unit. But other than that, I just think it's a bit more of a C tier in the team game setting. All right, next up we have the Magyars, and this might come as a bit of a surprise, but I'm going to put the Magyar team bonus up here actually in the A tier, right? So Magyar team bonus is that foot archers have +2 line of sight, and I think this is really great because for a few reasons. One, when you're Magyars, you're probably playing the cavalry role, even though you do have fully upgraded Arbalists, so you can play the archer role, right? But assuming even that the Magyar player is playing cavalry because they get fully upgraded paladin and free melee upgrades for their attack, you're helping the archer player by giving them more vision, and this helps your archer player find stray villagers, helps them see more to micro in those team battles. And if there are mangonels or siege out on the field in Castle Age, it's a lot easier to avoid them. So the reason I'm putting this in the A tier as opposed to, say, the Frank bonus is that the Magyar bonus for Archer Line of Sight is also helping you tactically during Feudal Age by having more vision, right? And so I think that vision is an incredibly underrated aspect of Age of Empires in general, but especially team games. And so it's worth noting though, right? I actually had asked Hera about this question. Shout out to him, legendary Age of Empires 2 player. And he had told me one of the things that bothered him about this bonus is that it often kind of affected his ability to know that he was at the right range to micro with his archers. And so I do think that that's something you want to keep in mind with the Magyars, because a lot of times for archers, line of sight and range are pretty close to being equivalent. So when you are playing as Magyars, or if you're playing archers, or if you have a Magyar teammate, just know you're going to see a lot more of the map, and so you may have to judge your range a bit with a bit differently than you would, let's say, than if you're not playing with it. But I think that having the vision is just really, really helpful. All right, moving on to the Malay. So Malay is another civilization where we have a primarily water bonus. I still think it's probably closer to a D. Their bonus is that docks and harbors, which are unique to Malay anyways, have more line of sight. It's just not my favorite water bonus. It's not really helping you win battles. It's just giving you a little bit more warning when something's coming. But if you have fishing ships, right, scrambling your fishing ships, the damage has already been done in that case. And so I just don't think it's moving the needle all that much. It's again, that's a line of sight bonus that, because it's not really a tactical bonus, whereas the knight or foot archer line of sight bonuses are tactical bonuses, and there's almost always going to be knights and archers in team game meta. I just don't think that it's having an incredible impact on the game. Next up, we have the Malians. And Malians, this might be a surprise, but I'm going to go ahead and put them into the A tier next to the Magyars. Malians, your universities work 80% faster, right? You are graduating in a heartbeat. This is a very strong bonus. It allows you to get fast ballistics, right? Which is really important for your archer accuracy and being able to actually take down knights with your crossbows that maybe you're trying to run away and use their mobility to dodge shots. And it's also very important for getting chemistry fast for bombard cannons and increasing the power of your arbalist, because it is granting you +1 attack. And also for getting siege engineers for your trebuchets or bombard cannons if you have access to that technology, that's going to help you take down buildings a lot quicker. Maybe even getting access to bombard towers. Bombard towers can be really useful in team games in the late game in order to be able to take map control and defend trade or press in on an opponent. So I think the Malian University is actually, I think it's low-key really strong. And honestly, if you wanted to make an argument for S tier, I think that there definitely is one. However, you know, if you don't have siege engineers, if a civ doesn't have bombard towers, you know, it's not affecting everything, but there's enough things that it is affecting to where I do think it's pretty strong. But again, it's probably not a game breaker. It's probably just giving you a bit more opportunities to have a window of advantage on your opponent. Now, next up we have the Malians. We already talked about Malians. The Mayans. I think the Mayans are in the B tier, and the Mayan team bonus is that walls are 50% cheaper. So that means for palisade walls, right, they're going to cost 3 wood. That gets run down to 2 actually, so you're really not getting quite as much of a bonus. But your stone walls should be a bit cheaper. And this is pretty helpful because, again, getting walled up is so important, but you're probably going to have a lot of house walls. So that's really something to keep in mind there. I think that's more of a B tier. I think the Cumin bonus is stronger because it's giving your walls more survivability. All right, so now let's jump back into the tier list here, and let's take a look at the Mongols. Mongols, I gotta say, all right, take a look on my notes here. I really got to put Mongols in the S tier. So the bonus that you're giving your teammates is an extra +2 line of sight in terms of scouting, and that's really fantastic. I mean, first of all, it's one of the best early game bonuses just in general, and the fact that all of your allies are getting it is really massive. Now, it's also having a big effect on your feudal age because now your scout player, whether it's you or somebody else, because the Mongols, you know, can play archers, you do get arbalist, right? So the Mongol player here, right, or whether it's any scout player, right, is going to have that bonus, and that's going to be really, really strong to help find enemies. It's kind of similar to the Magyar bonus in a little bit. It's having its effect more in Dark Age and Feudal Age. I think the Magyar bonus is having its effect more in Feudal Age and Castle Age. And I think that makes the Mongol bonus just a bit stronger. Once you get out of Feudal Age, scouts tend to not see that much of the game. Sometimes in a 2v2 you might see like a full light cav scenario, especially if you're up against something like Turks or, I mean, maybe Indians it's possible to see it with, but it's pretty rare. Slavs sometimes will do it just because of the faster farms, they can get numbers, but ultimately, right, is a bonus that does start to lose its effectiveness pretty quick in Castle Age, but it's so strong in Dark Age and it's so strong in Feudal Age that I think we got to give it the S tier. Now, next up we have the Persians, and Persians is tough. I think Persians, I'm torn between A and B tier for the Persians. Let's keep them in the A tier for the moment and see what we think. So the Persian team bonus is that knights get +2 attack versus archers. This is a really, really strong bonus in Castle Age and beyond because, you know, I mean, if you think you're doing that +2 attack, you're getting rid of archers a lot more easily, and you're thinning out those numbers really well. And it's pretty good because it's, you know, you're almost bound to encounter archers right in the game, given what the meta is. I think that the issue with it, and I think the reason why it's actually a B tier bonus is for a couple reasons. One, knights are going to dominate crossbows anyways, and so if you've already closed the distance on a group of crossbows, they're probably in bad shape anyways, and probably the other knights have already been thinned out. And not only that, but it's really only helping you in, say, something like Castle Age and probably beyond. And, you know, I don't know, I just don't think it's moving the needle quite as much. Like, it's it's not really changing the tactics of your civilization, right? Like when you have, like if you have Malians, right now you have, with the faster working universities, you have opened up, right, your strategy profile, right? If you're playing as like Magyars with the +2 foot archer line of sight, right now you can see things that you otherwise wouldn't, and that affects the way that you're going to deploy your forces, the decisions that you make. I feel like with Persians, this is not really changing the decisions that you make. It just makes your knights a bit stronger versus archers. I think it's really close. I think it's really close to being A tier. And gosh, this is one of the bonuses I'm torn the most about, because the reason that now I'm thinking even more, like going back on myself and thinking more about the A tier for the bonus, is just because big groups of Arbalists can be so strong, and oftentimes the player that gets to Arbalist quickly, gets that big massive crossbows, can be so deadly, and being able to have that +2 attack is pretty nice, and it is helping you win in Castle Age. It's helping you do damage to your opponent at the end of the day. And honestly, if you can thin out some crossbow numbers and keep a couple knights alive, that's going to keep your mass alive. So I think that there's a rationale here for the A tier. Actually, I think there's a rationale for the A tier. And you know what? I actually think, just thinking about it, I think that there's a rationale here for the Mayans also being A tier, just because walls are also so important in feudal age that I think I'm going to make kind of a double improvise here, right? Put Mayans in the A tier and put Persians in the A tier as well. Now, next up we have the Poles, and Poles are going to have to go into the B tier, I think. So, and this is actually a really interesting comparison with the Persians. The Poles team bonus is that scouts do +1 attack against archers. Now, this is a pretty nice bonus in feudal age, right? But then it disappears for a while until maybe in a post-imperial setting where you would be making a lot of hussars, right? Your cavalry civ, or heck, maybe even your archer civ, especially if you're playing with an archer civ that gets some good scout line units like Italians or Saracens, right? So scouts doing +1 attack against archers is pretty strong. It's a nice feudal age bonus. It's not helping you out in Dark Age, not really helping you out in Castle Age. And to me, right, like that kind of starts to become the difference, where it's limited in terms of the phase that it's in. It does help you against archers, but +1 attack, right, is, it's basically half as strong as the Persian bonus, because archers don't gain that much HP as they go through the ages, right? So having that +1 attack, it's okay, right? And it gives you a little bit of an advantage, but it's still not doing quite the work, I think, of, say, having something like +2. Now, if it was +2, now that would get really interesting and maybe be an A tier bonus. So I think it's a nice help, but I don't think it's enough to get us out of B tier. All right, next up we have the Portuguese, and Portuguese to me are super easy S tier. The team bonus for Portuguese is that you have free cartography from the start of the game. Now, you might be asking, what is cartography, right? I've never, researched that a day in my life. Well, that's why Jimmy's here for you. Cartography is what allows you to see the vision of your allies. So the fact that you get cartography from the start of the game, and this is so in Dark Age, right, means that you can see all of your allies and their exploration from the jump. That is a very, very nice bonus for putting pressure on in feudal age, because you actually don't need a market to get cartography. That's normally the way that you get it. The fact that you don't need it is very, very strong, and it makes Portuguese a great team game civilization. Next up, we have the Saracens, and with the Saracens, this is another really, really tough one. But I think at the end of the day with Saracens, I think I gotta put this bonus in the B tier. So with Saracens, foot archers are going to do extra attack against buildings. Now, this is a good bonus, right? Because now your flank civs are going to be able to take out buildings pretty quickly. But you need a pretty big mass of archers to do it. It's really helpful in Feudal Age for getting through enemy walls. Gosh, I don't know. Thinking about it that way, actually, that's starting to sound a little bit more like an A tier bonus. I know I really like playing with the Saracens and using this bonus a lot, or having a Saracen ally. And just being able to dominate the production buildings of an enemy, or even range town centers, can be very strong, right? There was a time when this bonus actually was even stronger than it is now, and the Mayans had obsidian arrows, and that created for some really absurd team games with Mayans in it, and that was a pretty worthy nerf to Mayans that really kind of evened things out for team gameplay. I still think it's a very strong bonus. There was a time when it was only +1 back in the day. That I don't think was very strong, really moving the needle, but I believe it's +2 nowadays, right? It's changed a number of times over the years. I think it's +2, the team bonus for Saracens. It might be +3 though, actually. Or maybe in practice, I think it's +3 actually. It's pretty strong, I gotta say, right? It's a very strong bonus, and for archers to be able to take out production buildings, I think that gives them. The reason I think it's an A tier bonus is that it does add something into your strategy set that normally you wouldn't be able to do. And for me, that really is starting to look like an A tier bonus. All right, next up we have the Sicilians, and we do have a water map bonus here where transport ships are discounted. I think it's 50% and have extra line of sight. This is somewhere between C and D tier. I think it's a bit more of a D tier, honestly. I don't think that the cost on transport ships have ever been a major problem. The extra line of sight can be a little bit nice, but again, it's what you're going to do with that. Finding a decent place to land can be good, but I just don't think that's, again, it's not changing how you're playing the game or what your opponents have to deal with. I don't know, it's just kind of a big shrug to me, honestly. So, D tier, I think on water maps it's pretty helpful, but I don't think it's anything terribly wild. Alright, next up we have the Slavs, and I put Slavs in the B tier. Our bonus here is that military production buildings, other than I think like castles and Krapos and things like that, provide 5 populations, so they're basically like a house. And that is actually a decent bonus, particularly for feudal aggression and getting some little bit faster uptimes, right? Where you know that your barracks is going to equal a house, so you save a little bit of wood, save a little bit of villager production, and when you're in the transition between Dark and Feudal Age, saving any time you can get with your villagers, I think can have a nice effect. So I think it's a good B tier bonus, and you know, you're going to be building lots of military buildings, so it's going to save you some wood. Maybe not an incredible amount of wood. I do think that it falls off in some ways, just like as Feudal Age even goes on, because you're probably doing a good bit of walling with houses, and so you're probably not desperate for the population space, right? So I think that the bonus really has its effect in that early Feudal Age aggression, enabling you to take the initiative over your opponents, and then after that, it really starts to fall off. Okay, next up we have Spanish, and Spanish, easy S tier, maybe the best team game bonus, right? Your markets generate more gold, right? I think it's 33% more gold, and that is a big yes please. It means you don't need as many trade carts, or you can make a similar number of trade carts, and you just have an extensive amount of gold. You can generate more units. If your trade is under attack, right, you're going to have more gold saved up. The Spanish market bonus is a bonus that has won a lot of team games for folks, and so that's got to easily put it into the S tier. All right, now with the Tatars, and you know how I love my line of sight bonuses, but I gotta say, I really think that this one is an F tier bonus here. You just don't really see cavalry archers all that often in team games, and they're kind of expensive to get to. Foot archers you can get into earlier and take the initiative, and it's very rare that if your Tatars, your ally is going to be playing cavalry archers and you're not. That just seems strange. So we're really talking about a bonus that's really just helping the Tatar player, and I think it's a little better for a 1 versus 1, right? I think it's a good bonus there to get vision and raid and that sort of thing, but I just don't see it for team games. I don't think I've ever been in a team game where my opponents were, or some more my allies were able to use it, and being able to see more with Tatars, because it's not like if you're raiding, right? If you're playing as a mobile unit, comparing this, say, to the Magyar Foot Archer bonus, that's really useful because Foot Archers are kind of slow, and things like mangonels are just a really big problem because you can easily, as a Foot Archer mass, get into a situation where you find yourself in a really difficult spot that you can't disengage from. Cav Archers, though, they're very mobile, they're very fast, and you can disengage rather easily, and if you're going to be moving around a lot, I don't think that this is going to be as much of a help in terms of changing the game. So I think for team games, it's an F tier bonus. I might think about it differently, though, in 1 versus 1. Okay, next on our list, we have the Teutons, and I gotta put Teutons in the A tier here. Your units have more conversion resistance. It's basically like Researching Faith, but I think it's like kind of like half of it or something. The point is that it really gives your knights or your allies' knights, or heck, any of their units, right? But we're really more worried about knights here. Giving them conversion resistance is great. And hey, if you're in a 4v4, then your ally, who probably will have husbandry on their knights, the knights will barely ever get converted. It's a really dope bonus on Team Game Arena, actually, and enables a lot of your allies to make knights to contest relics and gather up those relics. So I think it's a really, really good bonus, actually, and it's worthy of an A tier. I just don't think that it's changing your strategy that much, and like I don't think it's the kind of bonus that'll necessarily win you games, right? Because even in something like Team Game Arena, you're probably trying to get trade up at some point, though it can be kind of awkward to trade on Arena, but you can get to it anyways. So I still don't think it doesn't make relics the end all be all, even on Arena. So I think it's an A tier. I think it's really good, really solid, but I don't think I can put it into the coveted S tier class. All right, now if we look at the Turks, Turks are interesting. I think Turks are a C tier. So your team bonus is that gunpowder units are created 25% faster. Okay, let's translate that into team game talk. What that really is meaning for your team games is that your ally or yourself are going to be able to get out bombard cannons 25% faster. Hand cannoneers are pretty uncommon, and if they're needed, you probably want the Turk player making them anyways, because I believe they get more HP, and Turks have free chemistry, so they'll be able to mass them quicker. But you're probably not seeing a lot of hand cannons. Bombard cannons, you definitely are probably going to see if your allies have them, because they're really nice at sniping trebuchets. And so being able to get bombard cannons out in the field faster is a pretty nice advantage. But again, that's giving you a nice advantage in a very, very, very situational part of the game. And so I think that really makes them a C tier. Next up, we have the Vietnamese. Oh boy. Vietnamese, I'm going to put in the F tier. Team bonus, Imperial Skirmisher is available. I mean, what's wrong with this bonus? I mean, first of all, the Vietnamese that have a Civ bonus that's not a team bonus where you see enemy town centers, that would be a much better team bonus, and I think would be definitely S tier. And so now what Vietnamese players typically do when they're in a team, they have to like X on the map where everybody is, and it's super annoying to play as a Vietnamese player for that reason, because you spend a lot of time reminding your allies where people are or early on, and it's just super annoying. The Imperial Skirmisher, first of all, it's an Imperial Age unit. You have to put resources into researching it, and it's a skirmisher at the end of the day. Now, for 1v1s, I think it's a great unit and very powerful. But in team games, where there's a lot of knights on the field, it's just, you're probably not going to see it that often. I think you'd see it more than something like the Genitor, because it still costs the same as an elite skirmisher, even though you do have to research the technology. But it's just not good. Right? Vietnamese need a different team bonus, as far as I'm concerned. I would love it if they would switch I think a lot of people have been saying this, have the Imperial Skirmisher just be a Civ bonus, and let the Town Center Vision be their team bonus. But, you know, it is what it is. All right, last we have the Vikings, and I think for Vikings, again, they have a water map bonus. Stocks cost minus 15%. I say let's go ahead, put that in the B tier. I think it's really strong on water maps, but it's not doing anything on Arabia. So that's the way it shakes out. And that's our tier list, right? So we have all of our civs, and as you can see, right, there's a lot of civs that have pretty good team bonuses, right? We do have some duds down there in the F and the D tier, but a decent number are closer to the top. A lot of civs, the team bonuses are really helpful, and when you're going into these team games now, what I suggest, one thing you might want to do is think about civilizations that synergize really well together, right? If you're going into a 3v3 and you want to make Britons even more dominant, maybe you put a Saracen player on the flank, right? Really help them out. You know, if you want to help, if your Magyar players go in open-in scouts and they're getting free melee upgrades, maybe you go archers with something like the Poles, and that way you have really strong scouts in feudal age. Start thinking about how to put these things together, and you'll help maximize your success in team games. Honestly, though, I think at the end of the day, right, the team games are so much about coordination, communicating with your allies, and working together, that I don't think any one single team bonus can win it for you, except maybe the Britons with those archery ranges, making archers so fast. Oh man, it's so crazy. But right, putting that aside, I think that you know, skill is going to trump the civilization bonuses. So get out on the ladder, have fun, and go play this game that we know and love. And with that, I'm Jimmy James 59, and I'll see you out there on the ladder. Peace.